Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So hopefully I'll keep you awake here for a few moments. If I can get the technology to work. Okay, very good. Before I get into maybe the more relevant aspects of my remarks, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my home campus and school. I know for many of you, you're familiar with IUPUI, thanks to the outstanding leadership of some of our faculty who have really been engaged with ASEE and ETLI, for example, Pat Fox and Elaine Cooney and Ken Reynolds, as well as many others. But for those of you that may not be quite as familiar with IUPUI, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about my home campus and school. So it was formed in 1969 from the merger of Indiana University and Purdue University programs that were in Indianapolis at that time. Now, quite frankly, I believe that the institution has become and is on a trajectory that our founders did not foresee, quite frankly. We've grown to a campus of 30,000 students. Many of these students are no longer students of circumstance, but rather choose or select IUPUI as their first institution. We've grown to a campus that's doing around $300 million a year in external research expenditures. Indiana University has the administrative and fiscal responsibilities, so all of the faculty at IUPUI at the end of the day are employees of Indiana University, although we also hold Purdue faculty appointments as well. Purdue University has academic oversight of all of the Purdue programs at IUPUI, but does not have the fiscal responsibility for those programs. And IU Bloomington and IUPUI are regarded as the two core research campuses of Indiana University. With $300 million of external funding on the IUPUI campus, it's very important to Indiana University to view those two campuses as the core of the institution. Now, our School of Engineering and Technology, I would argue, is perhaps the most diverse academically of the 20-some-odd schools that are on the IUPUI campus. As you'll see here, we have a wide array of programs, many of the traditional engineering fields that you would expect in a School of Engineering and Technology. However, IUPUI is very innovative, not afraid to try new things. So we have a couple of engineering programs here that are quite unusual. Energy engineering, and perhaps most unique, is our Motorsports engineering program, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in my focused remarks. You'll also see we have a wide array of engineering technology programs that you would expect. Per ASEE data, I believe we're number 2 in the nation in terms of the number of BS degrees granted in engineering technology. So you can see here the wide array of programs we have. Being very unusual, we also offer a technology degree in music technology, which happens to be an IU degree that's under my area of responsibility. We have invested in our graduate programs. They're growing rapidly, both in engineering and engineering technology. One thing I'd like to point out is in our MS degree in technology, you'll see the various concentrations that are here. One area that I'm really proud about is our Woodrow Wilson program, where we're finding many individuals who have a traditional degree in engineering are coming back to our institution to pursue an MS in technology in a program that's closely coupled with our School of Education that leads to licensure, and then going back into the K through 12 community to help us grow that STEM pipeline, which we all know is so critically important for all of our disciplines. So this is something that we're really proud about as part of our technology programs within our campus. Another area that we're investing in is growing our Ph.D. program. Now, I say that with the acknowledgement that Purdue West Lafayette oversees the admission of our Ph.D. students as well as granting of the degree, whereas our BS and MS degrees, although Purdue degrees, we control those fairly autonomously in terms of admission and so on. But for our Ph.D. program, that those students can complete with residence at IUPUI, but the award is granted by West Lafayette. Now, as I was and very much appreciate the invitation to speak on this panel. As I was reflecting on the topic, what's the role of industry? What are those attributes, characteristics of our students that industry really wants to see in those that they employ? The old theory versus practice was where my thoughts began to go, and I think we've heard a lot of that this morning. Whether you call it theory versus practice, engineering science versus engineering technology, research versus applied engineer. At the end of the day, I believe this particular quote that's in a Tom Clancy novel, and I think it's particularly appropriate given the passing of Tom Clancy this week, is to cite this particular inscription from a sign from a novel. Theory is when you understand everything but nothing works. Practice is when everything works but nobody understands why. At this station, theory and practice are united, so nothing works and nobody understands why. Well, what if we had the opportunity to try to bring out the best in what is often associated with the engineering curricula, as well as what's associated with the engineering technology curricula? I know many of us, when we've engaged in spirited debate, and some of that went on this morning, we've often used this theory versus practice thesis, if you will, to not only tout the strengths of our respective programs, but to also identify their shortcomings. So what if we have the opportunity to really try to work where theory and practice are united? So most things work and most understand why. So what if we had the opportunity to build a curriculum from the ground up to address employers' needs, make our graduates more job ready? Would we not want to unite what's best in engineering and engineering technology curricula to make them more connected and mutually dependent? Certainly we would want industry to co-develop the curriculum and, most importantly, share in the responsibility for its success. If we're going to work within the existing framework of change within a university environment, we need to provide a pathway to credentials, degree or certificate for both engineering and engineering technology students. This reminds me of a joke regarding change. Change is a relative thing, right? The turtle that was mugged by the mob of snails was interviewed by the police, and they said, "Mr. Turtle, what happened?" He said, "I don't know, it all happened so fast." But anyway, we want to focus on a curricula that is very much based on experience if we're going to develop a job-ready curriculum. So as I was mentioning in my background remarks, one of the strengths of having a broad portfolio in both engineering and engineering technology, it gives us the opportunity to leverage the talents of our faculty. So please consider this remainder of my remarks really a case study. In this case, I'm really talking about a bottom-up approach to some of the more top-down issues that have been talked about previously. Well, we, in many ways, have realized many of the characteristics that I mentioned in the previous slide, with two pathways to credentials for our students. One is a new BS degree in motorsports engineering, and the other is a motorsports engineering technology certificate that is an option for some of the more traditional engineering technology disciplines. These programs are very much tightly coupled, mutually dependent both in the courses and the various experiences that students have. A very unusual aspect of the BS in Motorsports Engineering program, to my knowledge, it's the only program that contains those things that you would expect in most traditional engineering curricula, but yet it is completely contained within a department of engineering technology, which I believe is a very innovative kind of putting it out there approach to things. As I mentioned, we leverage the faculty talent primarily in mechanical engineering and mechanical engineering technology. And I don't necessarily mean to say that everyone should be pursuing a motorsports program, but I believe it does have some of the salient features that have been talked about previously today. We have the very unique gift of location in terms of being the self-proclaimed motorsports capital of the world. So we have another unique talent base in the sense that we have many racing engineers in the community, very accomplished racing engineers that have been part of Indy 500, Formula One winning teams. And many of these individuals are ready for a career transition to academia, at least for a season. And by season, I don't mean racing season. I mean a season of their career. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, just depending on the nature of their personal situation. So this really gives us a unique dynamic for a closely coupled curricula that combines engineering and engineering technology and brings in significant industry support. So a little bit more background. We graduated our first cohort this spring. All of these students were fully employed either in the motorsports or the automotive industries. All had internship or co-op experience. And we've had remarkable success for our technology certificate awardees along the engineering technology tracks as well. Now, in terms of ABET accreditation, which I know has also been something we've been talking about this morning, our plan is for the BS in Motorsports Engineering to pursue the general criteria under EAC of ABET. So what are going to be the other accreditation implications of an engineering department or program being contained completely within an engineering technology department? Now let me give you a little bit more of the flavor in terms of what the students are doing, how industry is intimately involved throughout the students' experience. So perhaps one of the most successful collaborations has been the design of the first race car that came out of the motorsports program. Industry basically provided an old bare frame model and then also provided all of the new parts that were required to build the car. Now these parts were, for the most part, designed and implemented by our students, motorsports engineering students, mechanical engineering technology students, and other students. Now, in this barter system, if you will, in exchange for essentially the raw materials to implement this project, in turn, as the students were designing and implementing, building the race car, they developed an electronic technical manual that was then provided to the industry sponsor for the in-kind gifts, if you will, for the various parts. Now, every aspect of this race car was designed and built primarily by motorsports engineering and mechanical engineering technology students. Now, in terms of that close coupling and tight integration, the car was basically implemented through a series of classes as well as major design experiences. So, for example, the roll cage was a project class that was co-located with engineering technology and engineering students. Some of the work was done through traditional required classes, such as vehicle dynamics or IC engine design class. Now, the way these classes are implemented, there's actually an MET, for example, section of vehicle dynamics, in a motorsports engineering section. They co-locate, they co-meet. Much of the exposure is done in a joint experience. Now, in terms of the ABET assessment, there is some variation in terms of some of the student outcomes, as the criteria, although harmonized, are not quite as harmonious as one might think. But anyway, the point is these experiences are mutually dependent upon one another and is truly multidisciplinary in the sense of bringing out the best in our, quote, traditional engineering and engineering technology students. Another aspect of this is once they have designed and implemented the car, it's not over. These students then, either they or the next cohort of students, many of them want to race this vehicle in very competitive venues. So when we're talking with employers, one of the things they talk about, especially in the racing industry, is the commitment to the profession that's so important in students. The idea, if you're going to be on a race team, there's travel involved. There's sleeping together in close quarters as you're getting the race car prepared to compete for a given race. The work ethic that's required by these students, whether they're engineering technology students or engineering, is really second to none because of their passion, if you will, for what they're doing. In many cases, you may not have an Apollo 13 moment where you must improvise, but racing is an area where you can't necessarily predict what's going to happen. Students have to think on their feet. They have to improvise. Many times when they're very tired after a long journey to get where they are. You can't predict the weather always with great accuracy. So these students really have to be very adaptable to whatever challenges they're facing at that moment in time. This is a characteristic that's immediately recognized by employers of our motorsports engineering and motorsports engineering technology students. These race teams have been very successful. For example, we had the first student team ever to participate in the SCCA Sports Car Club of America National Championship. So this is a part of their ongoing experiential work, is racing the vehicles that they've designed and implemented as part of the motorsports engineering program. And this passes down from cohort to cohort of students. A second car, as you see here, was also built from the ground up, much like the same process from the first car that I mentioned. And once again, a new technical manual was produced for industry, for the sponsor, which was really the quid pro quo, if you will, with industry's involvement. Perhaps one of the design projects that got most recognition, both nationally and internationally, many of you who may not be racing fans may not have heard of Don Schumacher, but one of the world-class top fuel racing teams. For this particular project, students actually redesigned the Top Fuel chassis, and then it went on to set a world record in Englishtown, New Jersey, the fastest time ever for a 1,000-foot drag race. And this came from Don Schumacher's team, attributed that success to the work of our students. Now, what did we get in turn? In this case, this wasn't done as part of an externally funded grant. However, a lot of insight was provided from the racing teams, a lot of time. They had skin in the game in terms of working with our students. And at the end of the day, part of the quid pro quo, as you'll see here on Don Schumacher's world-class dragster, you see Motorsports at IUPUI. Now, I guarantee you at a cost of $0, we got a lot better deal than Matco Tools did to get their emblem on the side of the car. Interestingly, we were out in California because we've been successful in recruiting students from all over the nation into motorsports engineering. And one student says, "Oh, now I know what IUPUI means. I saw it on Don Schumacher's dragster, and now I know what it means." And so we've really been getting, I think, a lot of visibility and publicity from industry's recognition of the great work our students have done. Pete Hilton, who is our director of our motorsports engineering program, he is an associate professor of motorsports engineering. He also has a joint appointment as an associate professor of mechanical engineering technology. Here's a quote from the first experience. "We needed students who were strong on the mechanic and fabrication side, as well as those that were good at design and graphics, those that had strong written communication skills. This meant some of the skills were associated with MET, some with engineering. In the end, the car was built, the manual was produced, and both were a success. A great example of engineering and engineering technology working together." I don't necessarily know what the future holds. I know for us, we do have a great opportunity to leverage the best in talent between engineering and engineering technology. I know that us versus them depletes our energy and it's not going to take us to the next level. So I would encourage you, no matter what your perspective might be, at the end of the day, engineering technology, we must work together. We must raise the tide for all boats, and I believe we will raise the engineering and engineering technology to a new height. So please consider this and relate it to your own way, your own opportunities that you might have in your own regions, your own cities and towns. I hope this particular approach as a case study will be of some value to you. So thank you.